Hi everyone, this is Nikki with Design Like a Pro, and today I'm excited to share another magazine tutorial for all of you guys out there that are designing your own magazines, layouts, things like that. The fun part about this lesson is we are going to be designing 4 pages for a magazine article. This is going to be a standard 3-page article. It's very, very popular and a common article layout, but we are going to add an ad in the mix as well. So this is something that is really popular in beauty magazines, lifestyle magazines, fashion magazines, pretty much any magazine, but really you're going to see this a lot in those particular ones. So this is going to give you an opportunity to design a 3-page layout for your articles and then have an ad in the mix as well. And that's going to be a full page ad. So let's go ahead and get started and set up our document. What we are going to do is come in here and go to create a new document. And I'm going to go ahead and check preview so that we can see what we're doing as we're doing this. And this is one of the newer features of InDesign CC. It's really important to think about the size of this. We are designing this article on the fly, and it eventually could be part of a larger magazine layout. But oftentimes, if you're working in teams, you may be responsible for just working on one specific section of the magazine, and you may be doing that in InDesign, and then linking that together with the bigger magazine publication. So in this case, we're still very aware of what the overall settings are for our magazine, and we're just going to create something for this specific layout right now. So what I'm doing is a standard magazine size, and there's a bunch of different ones depending on the project, but this is a very standard US size for a lot of magazines. So 8.2677 inches by 11.6929. Now, that might sound really crazy to you, but that's what we have. And then we do, of course, want to go down here and add our 1/8 inch bleed to all of the outsides of our document. Everything else is the same. We want to make sure that facing pages is checked, and we can go ahead here and add the pages that we want. We are going to be working on a 4-page layout, so we can go ahead and add those 4 pages. Facing pages is just going to make sure that we're actually designing in spreads, so it's going to take those pages and put them side by side. Now, one thing to note, when you are designing in InDesign with facing pages, the first page is always done like this, and the last page is always done like this. It sort of creates like a booklet look, but if you're designing, that's not really helpful if you're designing a section of your book. So usually what I do is this. I will add some pages just to put those spreads the way I want it, and I'll just ignore the first one for now. So this gives me my 4 pages right here, side by side. The next flow that I normally do is set up a master page. So I'm going to come in here to my A master, and in magazine land, master pages are great for footer content, that content that you want to appear on every single page of your magazine, but not necessarily every single page, and you'll see what I mean when we get into the design part of this. But ideally, it's going to be repeatable. And when it comes to magazines, I tend to have several master pages, depending on whether I have a light background, a dark background, a need for a footer, no need for a footer, headers, all of that. So this is all what is great about master pages, but we are going to keep it fairly simple for this layout and just focus on the footer for now. So I'm going to make sure that I'm on the A master page here. And we're going to go ahead and design really quickly our footer content. So I'm going to zoom in so we can see. And I like to keep the footers fairly simple. This layout, by the way, is going to be a very modern design. So the first thing I'm going to do is come and grab just the rectangle and draw out a skinny rectangle here. And then I'm going to create a sort of a light gray color swatch. So let's go ahead and see what about 62% looks like. We may want to go lighter than that, but we will drop that in for now. Yeah, we're going to want to go lighter than that. So we can always change our colors by double clicking it again. And the nice thing about InDesign is any place that this color is, it's going to automatically update for us. And if you want to see what you're doing, you just hit preview. So we want a very, very light gray. All right, something like that. And that's where we're going to put our page number. So I'm going to take a text box, draw it out right click in here and we want to insert a special character and the current page number. And then we want to go ahead and style that to fit the font styles that we want. So I'm going to use Sensation here. We want this to be very modern, and I'm going to drop the page number size down. So we have something like so, and then we want to bring this down into our gray box. And then we can shrink all of this up. Okay, perfect. Now, we want to create another text box with more information. So I'm just going to hold down Alt-Shift, one of my favorite keyboard shortcuts, to duplicate and then constrain that in the same line to add more content. So we're basically just going to maybe have the name of the magazine. Bring that out more, and some spaces, and then perhaps you want the website. Okay, so just something like that works. And because this is the footer, we want to bring this. I usually bring footer content just below the margin line, but not too far down. If you come too far down, you really risk cutting that off. So we are going to bring that all the way up, like so. And then what I'm going to do is take this even further down because it is footer content. It doesn't need to be as large. Okay, so that's the left pages. We need to essentially duplicate this for the right side and then just swap it. So again, Alt-Shift after selecting all of the content, and we're going to bring it over here, line it up. And then the only thing that we have to do is essentially swap this content. So we want the rectangle over here, and we want this over here. And then that means that we need to move this guy. Okay. And then if we zoom out just to make sure that our positioning is very close, that looks good. Okay. All right, so now we have our basic footer down. So that's going to appear on every page for the most part of our article text. So now we're ready to start designing our layouts. I'm going to come here to our first 2-page spread and start dropping in the content. And you can see that already we have this set up for the footer to populate. Now, right away, this may not be the right page numbers, but that's why we have current page number set, because if this were to be dropped into a bigger magazine, it's going to pull the current page number that that layout artist is going to position this article. So you don't have to worry so much about the page numbers being incorrect in this part if you are in fact doing what I'm doing, which is designing a smaller section. That's what the current page number is super helpful doing. Okay, so the first thing we're going to focus on is what do we want to do for content? So I am a huge advocate for placing your imagery first, and that really helps you figure out what options you have for text, because striking imagery is always going to grab attention first. We want to start with our image, and then we can start placing content around that. So if I come over to my assets, we have this really colorful photo here that we are going to use for this. And if I immediately drop this in, I can maybe start to get some ideas. This is always the hardest part, by the way. Like, how do you want to lay out your content? This may take some playing around to get right, but I'm going to give you an idea here that you can definitely use. It's a really easy one to get started with placing text and photos. So when you have a photo this large, you want this to dominate the whole spread. And we're going to play with this image going across both spreads because, yeah, you can easily throw it off to the left or the right and it stays on the page. But break out of the confines of lines here, especially when you have an image that is unique enough that it's not going to hurt if it gets folded in half. That's one thing to really consider when you're placing images across spreads, is what's going to happen on the fold. But in this case, we have an image that is going to be okay wherever it may be folded. So we can see our fold line right here. So if we place this image a little bit like this, and we're going to move it maybe kind of there to get us started. So part of the image is on this side of the page and part of the image is on this side of the page. And then what I'm going to do is hold down Command Shift on a Mac or Control Shift on a PC and pull this out so that it fills the rest of our page. And now you can see that this image covered up the footer. That's okay. We have the footer on this side to say what page our article is starting on. So in this case, it's going to be just fine. And then we have something like this. If I were to preview it really quick with W, we get an idea of how it's going to trim up. And that's just a really striking set of images, and we want it to be large enough to see. Okay, so this helps. Why? We placed our image. We kind of like the way this is going. Now we know where we can put text. We basically can put text in this column over here, right? So this image has really helped us by figuring out what options we have. Now, again, there's many different ways that you can do this, but this is just one that we can do when we've got a collage going on. So one thing I'm going to do is just a decorative element here that's going to dress up this photo. And that means that I'm going to just take a stroke line, drag it to about there, and we are going to add a nice stroke to that. Say about 7, or we want it to be pretty wide. Let's try 10. We may go wider than that. Now we need a color. And let's make that a nice orange color. I always like to pick colors from within my images that will severely add to these complementing any text styling that you do if you pick colors from your images. So with this in mind, we want to do a kind of a nice deep orange, something like that. Perfect. Okay, and seeing that, now I want to make this even bigger. Not that big. Let's go with 15. Okay, great. Nice. And I want to create another orange swatch based off of that, but let's make that a little brighter. Okay. Okay, something like that. It just kind of emphasizes and highlights against the green there. So it's just a decorative element. Okay, and now we need a section title. So I'm going to drag out a text box at the top here, and we are just going to call this Lifestyle Food. That's sort of the section of this magazine that we're working on. And we want to pull in that same footer text, which is Sensation Regular. And we need to increase the size of this quite substantially. Maybe not quite that much, like 24. And then let's go ahead and hit that gray, but I know we're going to want to make a darker version of it. So I'm just going to create a new swatch from that and make a little bit darker. Let's go to 82 and then we'll add that. So you saw I could take a current swatch and make a darker version of it. Pretty easy. And then there is a stroke hanging out on that, which we don't want. Okay. All right, so now we're going to position this just under the margin lines. We want to keep all important text within the margin lines so that they don't risk being cut away. Super, super important. Now I'm going to start getting a lot of boxes on here. I personally don't like to see that, so I like to just look in overprint preview. It just gives me a cleaner workspace so I don't see all those boundary lines around my text. Okay, so we're getting pretty far into this now. So let's go ahead and add a text box here to get started with our article. This would be the actual article text. So we're going to drag out another text box here just to get started. And we are going to fill it with placeholder text for now, but obviously if you had article text, you would go ahead and drop that in here. And then we're going to go ahead and style this by hitting Command or Control A to highlight all of the text. And we want to go ahead and make this a different style here. We want to stick with a, let's go with Futura. We want to stick with a sans serif, but not the same kind of style that we had for our title here. That way we get a visual break in our content. And when I style article text, I like to come over here and justify it in a square block, like so. And that sentence just looks weird, so we're going to do something like that. Okay, so the first this is the intro, so we don't want all of this text necessarily to appear here. So I'm going to make this a little bit larger, add some spacing between the text, and then we are going to delete the rest of it just so we can get a starting point here. Okay. I'm going to bring this all the way down, and we want this to come quite here. And you can see all these hyphens happening. Now, in most text, you're not going to have this. This is just because we're using filler text, but I do like to uncheck hyphenate just so the words flow a little better. And you can see that that automatically just cleaned that up a bit and made the spacing a little bit better in our paragraph. And then let's go ahead and highlight the first letter of our paragraph here by giving it a nice drop cap. And we're going to highlight that even more with a different color. We're going to make this a nice purple color, pulling from the grapes in the center there. So we are going to go with 59, 96, 24, and 8 for our values here. Gives us sort of a deep purple. And that's going to pull nicely against the orange. If you're ever struggling for color palettes, complementing bright warm colors and cool tones is really going to be a nice complementary style. So that's a good place to start. Teals and oranges, purples and oranges, reds and blues, reds and purples. All of that is going to really make your design pop. Okay, so now we've got a good article happening here. We're just starting out. Seeing this now, I want to make this swatch a little bit lighter. So if you ever select a text box, you can go ahead and over here, click the T. That's going to highlight the color of the text, not the box. So we can come in here and create a new color swatch. I just want to make this a little bit lighter than the previous version of it. So I still want that gray. There we go. That's just a little bit better because I'm going to come in here and make the paragraph text this darker gray instead of black. So that just is a better contrast, a little bit lighter to a little bit darker. Okay, so now we have the first 2-page spread. Let's go ahead and continue on to the next 2 pages. This is the sign that we're going to reserve for our ad. So we'll come to this last because I want to keep going with the flow of the article. It's important to think and not like distract yourself. If you're designing your article, keep designing your article so that it kind of still sticks with the flow. And the ad is always secondary, especially if it's coming to you. Not always are you going to be designing the ad. They may come to you from a brand and you're just going to drop it in. So that said, we'll continue on to this page here and keep designing our article. So if you have this text and it fits just perfectly right here, that's awesome, great, perfect. But there's a lot of cases where you always have spillover text, and then what do you do? So if I was just to bring this up and let's add back in more placeholder text, and what's nice is it's going to fit that style, and I'm just going to keep adding so it spills over. It's funny, it doesn't want to. Okay. So you get this, you get the little red plus sign, which means that you have more text in this text box than is appearing. And this happens a lot when you're working with magazines, is you're trying to basically puzzle this in so all of your text fits the way you want it to. So we have a whole other page, so we can take this content over. So what you want to do is take and hit the plus sign, and you see that you get a little icon like this. So you can drop that text box on the next page. And let's go ahead and fill that up. There we go. And it's pulling in on the paragraphs. It's pulling in from the previous with the drop cap. So I can go ahead and remove that. But this gives us some text to work with. So this is typically what's going to happen. You're going to have that spillover and you want to continue that on the next page. So we're going to keep that text the way we like. But hey, if you want to bring this up even more and make that shorter, you can. bring this down, and that text is going to spill over into the text box on the next page. So you're not going to lose that text. It's going to appear. This keeps those text boxes connected, which is really helpful. So let's go ahead and style this now. Let's go ahead and put this into 2 paragraphs, which would probably be a common thing. You can see where they naturally break here. So let's make 3. All right, so we've got 3 paragraphs to deal with, but we don't want to just leave it like this. This is pretty boring. So the first thing I like to do is come over here, right click, and go to text frame options. And let's go ahead and make this into a 2-column layout immediately. And this is a little bit tight here, so let's go ahead and increase our gutter a little bit and decrease the width a little bit. I'm going to increase that actually quite a bit. I want a lot of space in there. All right, so we've increased our gutter to give us more space between the 2 columns. And I'm going to edit this out here based on sort of the layout I'm going for. And this all works a lot better when you have actual text, not filler text that's not quite natural. But we want to bring this up to about here. And we're going to end that there just because I have an idea here for the layout that I'm trying to format. Okay. So we basically are going to end up with a 2-column like this. This is going to give us room for a block quote right here, which I want to show you how to style one, and then a large image down below. So that's sort of the look we're going for. I'm going to cut out even more text. Now, one of the things I do a lot of is I will edit magazine articles for design and layout if at all possible. So sometimes you have an article that's way too long and you do actually need to edit it for the space. It just represents the article better if you can do any of that editing. So if you have flexibility to do that, that's really helpful to cut out unnecessary words or something's just too long, and you can make editing choices for your layout. So now that we've got that spillover, let's go ahead and bring in our next image. And we have a nice image like this, and I'm going to hold down Command or Control Shift again just to scale this down. And we want the focus to really be on this image again, but we're not going to take this image across both spreads because this is going to be a full page ad here. So we need this image to stay within the confines of our article, in which case we're going to use the margin lines as a guide. And then we can go ahead and crop up a little bit if we need to. So to preview that, we have something like that. Very simple, but very clean and still very engaging between the text and the image. So again, I'm going to shrink this a bit and say we grabbed a quote from our article and we want to put a block quote here. If our text were to end here, let's put a block quote here. What would that look like? So I'm going to grab a text box, use the space over here to design this, and I'm just going to grab a line of text. That's typically what you're doing with block quotes. And let's go ahead and style this, remove the drop quote. And a block quote is not very long, by the way. It's usually fairly short, just something that's pulled out of the article for emphasis. So we are going to center align that. Block quotes are larger in scale than the rest of your body text so that it really stands out. And because we've used some very strong modern sans serif fonts, we're going to emphasize the block quote with a serif font just to give it a nice break. So I'm going to use Libra Baskerville here, and we're going to put it in italics for some additional emphasis. And this is a block quote, so we are going to put some quotes around this. Let's go ahead and give it a punctuation, and let's colorize it with that purple that we were using from the drop cap. Again, that's all going to tie it together really nicely when you're using similar colors. And add a little bit more space here. Okay, now we can bring this over. See how we have with space, because we need this to fit in here. So we may have to finagle a little bit. So as you can see, it was cut off. So that may mean that we need to shrink up everything. There we go. Bring something to another line. That's always something that you can do if a word is too long. Just bring it to another line, especially if you are center aligning everything. you have a little more flexibility with the flow of text. All right, so we're essentially just sizing it and line spacing choices to get this to fit the way we want. And if it's looking a little too long, again, this may be something you can edit or choose a different quote, but I would prefer this not to go to 5 lines. So I'm just gonna quickly do something like that because the look I'm going for is more like that. Okay. Now you can leave it like this. It stands out. If we were to preview that really quick, it stands out separate from the rest, but let's go ahead and add another design element that I like to do when I'm separating out block quotes. And I'm just going to hold down Alt-Shift and drag this over here to style it. And I just like to hit 3 little dots here and extra spaces. So it's not to be confused with the 3 dots at the end of a line, but the extra space, and we're going to make it a little bit larger, just using this as a design element. And we are going to use the orange color next to the purple, so that's going to give it a nice warm and cool contrast. And these colors work really well with the photo below as well. Great, so now we've just got a little line of design element here that's breaking this up. So now we have our article in place. Let's do one other thing. I like that orange. Let's go ahead and draw out another stroke here and make that the same as the one above. It was about 15, wasn't it? Yes. And bring that over and do the same treatment. This is again for consistency. Do the same treatment to this image as we did to this image, right? So it's going to bring that article all together if we do that. And I'm just going to take this though all the way down. So it just sort of creates a nice orange border, especially since there's a lot of purple happening in this image. That orange just really makes it pop. Great. Okay, so now we have our article pretty much all ready to go. So you can see it's very simple. We've got some great pops of imagery along with some complementary text, a little block quote here, very standard for most magazine articles. And we've got some complementary images on both pages just to keep it from being all text. So the next thing, and we'll end up on, is designing this ad. Now, if you're dropping in the ad, that's one thing, but we're going to go ahead and design this ad pretty quickly on the page just to give you something else to think about if you are one that's going to be stuck having to design ads on the fly. This happens a lot with smaller publications. An ad comes in and they don't have it, so you're designing it. So we're pretending that's the case here. Now, my tip for you with this is we want to take the master page off because we do not want a page number to appear on our design at all. So I'm just going to come over here to our pages, right click, apply master to pages, and we're going to say none here just because we don't want that page number to affect our ad at all. Okay, so now it's gone. So I always like to work from the back forward, just like I did here. In this case where we're going to be layering text on top of images where we didn't so much in the magazine article, we are with the ad. So I like to drop the background image in first. Let's go to that, and we're going to use this image here. And you may be thinking, hey, that's like a horizontal image. Why are you using it as a vertical? There's a lot of ways that you can creatively crop something to fit across. And you can see me just dropping this in, that actually doesn't look bad for a double page spread. So there's so much flexibility when it comes to image placement and InDesign and how you want to lay out your final designs. So I am bringing this in. We want to make sure this fits just the way that we want right there. We want to make sure all of this is bleed. This is a full bleed ad, so we need to make sure that all of our images are going to the bleeds. And it is automatically fitting as a horizontal, but you can see that I have brought this frame for the image all the way down, so we can come in here to fill frame proportionately, and it's going to fill that very nicely. So that is a way that we can take, and we need to do that again because we weren't all the way to the top. But this is a way that you can take a horizontal image, and if you have enough space around it, you can make a fairly decent cropped vertical version of that. So that is why I chose this photo specifically for this layout, just so that you can see how to make that work. Okay, so now we have the image in place. The next thing that I'm going to do is show you how to do a quick fade because you can tell this is a very light image. So putting text on this is not going to stand out the way that we want. So let's go ahead and grab a rectangle, and we are going to fill this with black. Remove the stroke that happened there, and let's go ahead and fill this with black. All right, and if we then right click on this, go to Effects, Transparency, we're going to put a gradient feather on this, and we're going to preview this so we can see what we're doing. We want this to go from the bottom to the top, so it gives us a place at the bottom to put our text, and it's just going to darken our image a little bit. This is definitely something you can do in Photoshop to your image and then bring the image in, but if you're designing in InDesign, you can definitely do this all at the same time. And then if you need to, you can adjust how intense this gradient is. We don't need it to be too intense because we are going to come up here to transparency and set this to multiply, which you can tell immediately made this look better. It just really blended a little bit better with the image. And then we can bring this slightly down in opacity if we need to. We're going to start there. If we need to come back and make this a little darker because of the text we use, we definitely can. But you can see that made a very natural dark transition. If I were to delete this, we went from really, really bright to adding a nice natural dark fade at the bottom. So this is a great way that we can now add some text. First thing I'm going to do is just grab a rectangle, and we're going to use that same orange color. And let's give it a name. Awesome product. And center align that. Definitely make that larger as it is the name of the product. And we are going to use the same Sensation font here. And I'm going to use the bold version for one of the words. That just gives it a little bit more standout. And this is going to go on top of our rectangle here. Okay, and let's go ahead and make that white instead of black. Much better. All right. And then we're going to make our offer down below. So I want to retain the same sort of style that we have going on with the text. And that means that I'm going to hold down Alt-Shift and bring that down here. And there's a couple things we're going to do here. This is going to be the word from 1999. We want to make the 1999 a superscript to just bring that up, and we want 1999 to be a lot larger, even larger than that. Okay, and we got to make the text box a little bit bigger. There we go, perfect. And let's bring that up a little bit. Inline spacing, we want that to be closer to the word from. And this is a great opportunity to use that bright orange to pop off of, pull in here. Okay, we just want to brighten this. It's a little dark. There we go. A little more. There. Great. Okay, and now I'm going to just copy that again. Alt-Shift is so great, or just Alt in general to duplicate, because you don't have to restyle everything. If you want to use the same style, it saves so much time. Right, we want that to say new. New from 1999. So this just makes a little more interesting item here for you, instead of just putting it all in one block. And then I'm going to take a line and we're going to drag that out and create a little separation here for what ads like to call the fine print. We'll make that white. All right, so we just have a little line there. Again, we're just going to duplicate this. This is going to be a lot smaller. Some restrictions. Apply, see store for details. Something like that. You know, that's typically what you see in a lot of ads, right? Especially if you have some deals going on. All right. we have something like that. And then there's only one other thing I want to add. We're just going to add a website down below, something we definitely want to have on our ads. So visit us online at www.awesomeproduct.com. And we want to make all of that caps, make this a little bit larger than our small fine print there. And let's go ahead and highlight the website with the same bright orange color. See, so that really makes all of that very consistent. And now you saw quickly how we can, I just want to, there we go, move that over a little more. Great. You saw we could quickly put an ad together with just a few key details, but have it stand out. One of the problems with ads is people tend to put way too much text on there. So we just have the basics and where to go next, which is to go online or visit in the store, right? All right. Okay, so now let's take a quick preview of this. We can see that we have designed 4 pages to our magazine fairly quickly. We had some really good images to start with. We placed our text, added some pops of color that we chose from our photos as inspiration, and we also dropped in a fairly quick ad to finish off this 4-page spread. Now you can continue adding to this magazine if you were going to continue to create more articles, or if this was going to get sent off and added into another one. At least you kind of quickly have an idea of how to lay out another magazine article. I have some links below to a few other tutorials that are going to show you another way that you can design a feature layout article that just covers 2 pages instead of 3. So that'll give you some more inspiration if you are needing it. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I do read all of the comments that come through and respond to almost everyone that I can. So definitely leave that below if you have a question or just feedback in general. I really love hearing from you guys and seeing how these tutorials help you in your projects. If you haven't already, please subscribe to stay up to date with the latest and greatest here at Design Like a Pro, and I will see you in the next episode.